I have decided to do a new playlist where I talk about the biggest lies that we have all been brought up to believe in, programmed to believe in, or have come to believe in. And I'm going to start out with the biggest of all the biggest lies. It's sort of the mother of all lies. And the reason I'm starting out with this one is that the purpose for giving these talks is, of course, to help you free yourself from these lies. And if you don't understand this one, the biggest lie, you can't really free yourself from the other lies. Because the biggest lie relates to the mind, and what the mind is, how it works, and what it can do and what it can't do. So let's get right into it. What is the biggest lie that human beings on Earth have been programmed to believe in? And it's simply this. It is that your state of mind, the conditions of your mind, your life experience, depends on conditions that you either have no control over or have no potential to take control over. Now, I imagine that some people are going to say, well, how is that the biggest lie? Well, just bear with me and I'll explain it. Right now, what is it that's happening to you? What's going on in your mind? You are having an experience. Right now you're watching this video, but just think about another situation. Whatever you were doing when you got up in the morning, you brushed your teeth, you ate breakfast, you went to work, or whatever you did. What happened to you through the day? You were having experiences. And as a result of this biggest lie that we have been brought up to believe in, you think that your experience is triggered by, produced by, tied to the outer conditions you are facing. In a way, you think, you've been brought up to think that your experience takes place outside yourself, in the sense that somebody yells at you at work and you feel bad. So we have all been brought up to believe that our experience of life either takes place somewhere out there in this world we're dealing with, or at least it's affected by it. And the only way we could change our experience is by changing the outer conditions. So if you are having a bad experience at your job, the only way to change that experience is to change your job. Just one example of many. So, why is this the biggest lie? Because it makes you a victim of conditions outside yourself. And if you want to be free from that sense of being a victim, sense of being a slave of external conditions, you have to overcome this lie. And in order to overcome the lie, what do you have to do? Well, the first step is to recognize a very, very simple fact. I said you are having an experience, but where is the experience taking place? Right now, you are watching a video. There's a guy in a light green shirt talking, waving his hands. Is your experience of me, is that taking place here where I'm sitting? Is it taking place in my mind? No. Your experience of me is taking place in your mind, inside your mind. And this is the key to overcoming the biggest lie, is to acknowledge and accept that your experience is taking place inside your mind. Now, why is that important? Because now you can see that your experience has two elements. I'm not trying to tell you, as some spiritual teachers or non-duality teachers are telling you, that everything that you experience takes place in your mind. I'm not trying to tell you that I exist only in your mind. I am a real person. I am sitting here in my little house in Denmark recording this video. You are sitting wherever you are sitting around the world watching this. There is an external situation, but that external situation is not your experience. It is only triggering your experience. And that means when we realize this, we realize there are two elements of your experience. That is, what is coming to you, the stimuli that's coming to you from outside your mind, and a process that's taking place inside your mind. And this now opens up a possibility that most people have not ever thought about or have never been taught about, but which really all children should be taught in kindergarten. And the possibility is this: the only way to change your experience of life is not to change the outer conditions, the outer stimuli. Because you can change your experience of life by changing something inside your mind. Now, remember I said in the beginning, you've been brought up to think that your inner experience is a product of external conditions that you don't have any control over. And it's perfectly true. You don't have control over me and what I'm saying. You could, of course, push the off button and get rid of me, but you can't control what I'm going to say next. But you can attain control over how you experience what I'm saying, how you react to it or don't react to it. And this is what most people have not been told and should have been told. So we now see that the huge lie that is projected at people is that the only way to change your internal experience of life is to change your external circumstances. And why has that lie been projected on it? Well, that's a topic that goes a little bit beyond, but it's because there's somebody who wants to control you. They either want to control you for political reasons, they want to control you because they want you to be a member of their religion, or they want to sell you something. Because what have we brought up with in these consumer-oriented societies most of us have grown up in? You are incomplete. You are lacking something. But somebody out there has what you are lacking, and they will sell it to you for a price. That's the essence of the consumer culture. You are incomplete, but you can become complete by buying this wonderful hairspray. And so what we have been programmed with is this lie that the only way to change your internal experience is to change your external circumstances. Now, of course, we can get some control over our external circumstances. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on the internal conditions. Because think of it this way. You may be experiencing a situation at work where a supervisor is bothering you, is on your case. But what if what that person is doing didn't bother you? What if it didn't bother you at all? What if you had no reaction to it whatsoever? Would it then be a problem? Even if the outer situation didn't change, would the other person's behavior be a problem for you if you had no reaction to it? So where does your reaction come from? Does it come from the other person? You see, you have a very simple choice to make here. You can say, if my reaction to this pestering supervisor comes from the supervisor, then that supervisor has control over my mind. And if that's what you want, I don't have a problem with it. There are a lot of people, and I have met many, many people in my life, who don't want to take control over their own mind. They want to be controlled by someone else or by external circumstances. because they are afraid to make their own decisions. They are afraid to take responsibility for themselves. And that's perfectly fine. I respect people's free will. But this video is made for people who want to overcome the lies, the big lies that we've been exposed to, be free of those lies. And as I said, the biggest lie is that something outside of yourself controls your mind. And if you want to be free of that, you have to come to a very simple conclusion. My reaction to that pestering supervisor is not determined or controlled by the supervisor. It takes place inside of my mind. Therefore, it is controlled by conditions inside my mind. And I cannot, very easily at least, control the external situation. But I can learn how to take control over my internal conditions. That means I have the potential to come to a point where I have no negative reaction. In fact, I have no reaction to the outer situation. And let me just tell you a secret here. When you get to a point where you don't have a reaction to an outer situation, you will see something you can't see right now. And when you see that, you might very well see that there is actually a way to change the outer situation. And in many cases, that means the outer situation will change. Sometimes it almost seems like it's happening all by itself. You don't really have to do anything. It's just changing, just because you got to a point where you have no reaction to it. Okay, so what is the situation of most people on the planet? They live their entire lives reacting to external circumstances. Their entire lives. And you may look at your own life and see you've done this so far, but the difference is you can come to realize you don't have to continue to do this for the rest of your life. But how can you achieve that? Only by looking at what is it inside your mind, which really means in the subconscious mind, that causes you to react to outer circumstances. And so what is it? Well, I'll use an analogy that I have used before, but it's a very fruitful analogy, so I'm going to use it again. Probably when you were a child, you learned how to ride a bicycle. And in the beginning, it was very difficult to keep the bicycle upright. But after a while, almost by itself, you could ride the bike. You could keep it upright. You could start looking at where you were going. You could even start enjoying the ride after a while. Why? What happened there? Well, what happened is that by practicing riding a bike, you were creating something, a structure, in your subconscious mind. We can compare it to a computer program. It's not exactly the same as I'll explain, but we can compare it to a computer program. You were programming your subconscious computer, the part of your subconscious computer that deals with your body. You were programming it so that the moment you started feeling that the bike was leaning to the left, without having to think about it consciously, your body started leaning to the right. And therefore, the bike went into balance. Now, in the beginning, you leaned too far to the right, and you realized this is not right, and then you had to lean to the left again, and you went back and forth by that. But there came a point where the movements became so small, there was not a problem anymore. The bike just stayed upright, and you were driving. So what you had created in the subconscious mind was something we can compare to. It is not exactly the same, but we can compare to a computer program. And this is one of those programs that runs in the background. So once it was created, you didn't need to be conscious of its existence. Okay, so this is the beginning of realizing how the subconscious mind works, but we need to take it a little further. Because the bicycle riding program is sort of a very practical program. And we need to realize we have created many more of these programs that are much more complex because they don't relate to just a practical situation like bike riding. They relate to situations where we have more of an emotional reaction. Now, we can still have an emotional reaction to riding a bike because we're afraid of falling down and scraping our knee. Or maybe we are even afraid of failing, so we can't do it. But in many other situations in life, we have a more complex emotional, psychological reaction to situations. Take a situation where, like most of us experienced when we were small children, there was an older child that teased us, bullied us, told us we were stupid. And we had to react to that. We couldn't react by beating up the older child because we weren't big enough to do it, even if we had wanted to do it, which many of us probably didn't. So we created another program to deal with that situation. And it may have been that we created a program that said that when somebody who's older than you, who has more power than you, bullies you, you just be quiet, you just submit and let it blow over. But now you're an adult and now you have this pestering supervisor at work who's just bullying you. So what do? Well, the supervisor's behavior triggers the program that you created when you were 5 years old. And now you're an adult now, but you're essentially reacting to a situation the same way you did when you were 5. And is that constructive? Is that the best way to react to the situation? Well, obviously it isn't, right? But why are you reacting? Because the program is still there. It's lying dormant. And if you've ever, I had the experience that I lived in the United States for many years where I didn't ride a bike for, 20 years or something? And then I got on a bike and I could instantly ride the bike. I didn't have to relearn it. Why? Because the program that I created when I was 5 years old and learned to ride a bike was still in my subconscious mind. And when I got on a bike, it was triggered and it took over and I could ride the bike. And the same thing, that program you created when you were bullied at 5 is still dormant in your mind. When you're bullied at work, even though you're now 20 or 30 or whatever, the program just kicks in and takes over your reactions. And that is why you can be controlled by external circumstances. That is why other people can control you. Because you have a number of these programs in the subconscious mind. And that's why I say that most people live their whole lives reacting. Because they have so many programs that whatever situation they're in, there's always some subconscious program that's triggered by the situation. And now they take over people's reactions, their whole experience of the situation. In fact, there are programs that are not just created by specific situations. There are programs that are created in reaction to life in general. And they color people's general reaction to life. I know people that I've known since I was a child. And they basically have the attitude that they are passive beings, they couldn't get an education, they weren't smart enough to get an education, they only got these poor factory jobs that didn't pay very much, and they're basically victims of life, and therefore it's okay that they drink 20 beers a day because what the heck, there's no purpose to life whatsoever. That's a subconscious program that colors people's general approach to life. And as I said, most people on Earth have one overriding program that says, oh, I'm a passive victim of external circumstances because it's the external circumstances that determines my state of mind, my inner experience of life. And there's nothing I can do about it. If I can't change an external circumstance, I can't change my reaction to it. That's a subconscious program that does that. Now, What can you do then to free yourself from these? Well, that's where we need to go a little bit further. I'm not going to explain everything in this video because I've given a number of other videos to talk about this. But what we have to realize here is we are conscious beings. We are conscious beings. And that means that when we are creating a subconscious program, we're not just creating something that's as mechanical as a computer program. Because you know a computer program, it doesn't have any feelings, it doesn't think. If a computer program is designed to guide a nuclear missile to hit a city with 10 million people, it has no feelings about it. It doesn't care. It doesn't have any empathy. It doesn't have any ability to think, oh, is this really a good idea? It will just do it. But what we create is more than that because we are conscious beings. So when we're creating what I have so far called a subconscious computer program, we're actually creating something that has a certain sense of consciousness, a certain sense of awareness. And that's why I prefer to call this, instead of a program, I prefer to call it a self. We are creating a self in the subconscious mind. And the reason why it's important to consider it a self is it's based on a belief. The self is based on a belief. Take the program when you were teased at the age of 5. I'm powerless. This is the basic belief of that self. And the self is aware that it exists, but it's also aware that it can only exist because of you. You created it, and it only continues to exist because you're feeding it energy. You're feeding it mental, psychological, psychic energy. So the self has a rudimentary survival instinct. That means what? It means it has the ability to pull on your mind. In other words, there's a situation that triggers the self, you're bullied by an adult, and it pulls your mind into the self, so now you're reacting to the situation through the self. Because you are now, when you're inside the self, you are colored by the self. It's like putting on colored glasses and everything you see has this colored tint. And what is it colored by? It's colored by the basic belief of the self that you are a powerless being. So the self has enough of a survival instinct that it does not want you to question that belief. It doesn't want you to question the belief that created the self. Because if you question it and see that it's actually an illusion, or at least it's an illusion at your present age that you're powerless, the self will die. You won't need the self anymore. If you are not a powerless being, because you are not 5 years old anymore, you don't need that self. And because the self doesn't want to die, it will use whatever pull it has on your mind to prevent you from questioning the self. It might even project thoughts into your mind that you shouldn't question this belief, or that the belief is right and that any argument you come up with is wrong. So it has a certain influence over you. Now, if you don't believe me, just watch your reactions to what I'm saying here. I'm almost certain that there's some kind of inner voice that is doubting, casting doubt upon what I'm saying, that doesn't want you to accept what I'm saying, that doesn't want you to believe it. And that's because, as I said, most of us have been programmed to see ourselves as powerless beings. Which means we have all created this self that wants us to be powerless, that is based on the belief that your internal experience of life depends on external circumstances. And this self doesn't want you to question this, and that is exactly why you might have had various reactions to this video, including doubting it, including mentally coming up with arguments against what I'm saying. Because the vast majority of people on this planet, if they were to watch this video, they would refuse to believe what I'm saying. They would come up with all kinds of arguments, all kinds of excuses for why this can't be true. But I'm only talking as I said, for people who want to free themselves from this lie, the biggest lie. And if you want to be free from the lie, you have to realize that the only way to take control over your own state of mind is to engage in a process of self-discovery, self-observation, self-mastery. And this process is that you come to see these subconscious selves that you have that are pulling you into reacting to specific situations a specific way or to life in general. Now again, doing this, I have to tell you honestly, this is not a snap your fingers process and you are suddenly free. But you can make a shift and realize that it is possible to be free because you can overcome these patterns. And I'm almost certain that if you are open to this video and if you watched until this point, you have already overcome some of these reactionary patterns or these reactionary selves. Because the only way you would really be open to this video is if you have already started this path of freeing yourself from these programmed responses. And you can probably look back at your life and see that you, at various points in your life, you face situations where you just didn't react the way you had been used to reacting to those kind of situations. You changed something, you changed some aspect of your life. Just look back at your life and see if you haven't done this. There may have been a point where you realized, why does this person always make me angry? And then you made a conscious decision not to react with anger anymore. Or it may be other situations, but there was some kind of situation where you made the decision to change how you react to certain people, certain situations. You may even have gone through a change where you decided to change your overall approach to life. I'm primarily talking here for people who are open to life having a spiritual side. And most of us were not brought up with any awareness of that. We were brought up by either some religion like Christianity that says there is a God, but you can't access it on your own. Or we were brought up with materialism that says there's nothing beyond the material world. So the essence of spirituality is there is a spiritual side to life, there's a spiritual world beyond the material, and we can know something about it and we can experience it directly within ourselves. We don't need to go through some external church or some authority figure in order to have that experience. That's the essence of spirituality. And if you are a spiritual person, then you have already confronted one of these subconscious selves. Because I guarantee you, and you will probably see this if you look back, there was opposition to you making that shift. And it might have taken you a while to do it. And there might have been various arguments for why you shouldn't go into this. Oh, spirituality is a hoax, or spirituality is of the devil and it calls you to go to hell, or all spiritual people are just superstitious because your mind is produced by the brain and blah, blah, blah. Or it's a cult, or they're out to get your money, or whatever comes up. There are all kinds of arguments out there. So what I'm saying is simply this. The biggest lie that we have all been brought up with, that we've all been exposed to, is this. Your internal experience of life depends on, or is even produced by, circumstances you can't control. Now there are some that will say it isn't just external situations, it's your brain. Because your brain is what produces your consciousness. But if you're open to the spiritual side of life, you will also know that that is another lie, another big lie, because there is more to you than the brain, there's more to you than the body. And this is why you can free yourself from the programming. You see, if the brain was the mind, and if the mind was a computer, once the programming is there, the computer can't free itself from the programming, right? You get a virus on your computer, and the computer can't just say, hey, I've got a virus, I'm going to get rid of this. You have to have some external intervention to remove the virus. But that's not the case with the mind. And the reason for that is why. Why is that? Because I said we are conscious beings. We are conscious beings. But we are more than just conscious. There's actually two aspects of consciousness. There's more, but there's two main ones. One is that you are experiencing. Another is you are aware that you are experiencing. Now, just very, very simple exercise here. So far, you've been watching this video. If you're still watching this video, because you've been focusing on what I have been saying. Now I'm asking you to just stop. Just become aware. Hey, I'm sitting here watching a video. I'm sitting here in this room. Now you imagine in your mind's eye what's outside the room you're in. It might be a building. You might be in a train. You might be on a bus, but there's something outside. There's some environment there. Now you mentally step outside that environment. You are looking into the room. You're looking at your body sitting there watching this video. You can step further back. Now you're hovering up there in the air, looking down upon the environment. You can even step back. You're looking at the planet from afar. What makes it possible for you to do this? As I said, most people live their entire lives reacting to situations. They are conscious because they're suffering. They are constantly experiencing that they're suffering. But they never step back and say, what's going on? Why am I suffering? What is the me that's suffering? What is the I? Who am I? What am I? What kind of being am I? And this is the other side of consciousness. There's just the experience, and then there's the awareness of the experience, which then makes it possible to say, well, if I'm aware that I'm having an experience, an experience usually is when we're looking out. There's stimuli coming from the outside. You are, of course, receiving stimuli from this video. So most of the time, our consciousness is focused on the outer trigger of the experience. But it's possible also for us to turn around and say, but who's experiencing? Why don't I look at the experiencer? Ooh, I've never looked at him before, or it. So what is experiencing? And there are many ways to describe this. There are many spiritual teachings, mystical teachings, many modern teachings that are more psychological, many that are into non-duality. But the basis of it all, no matter what kind of words you put on it, is that there's a core of your being that is having an experience. So there is some kind of self there. And remember what I have been saying so far. We have created all of these subconscious selves that reside in our subconscious mind. Now we have an experience, we have an external circumstance. It triggers one of these selves. And as the self is activated, we are now experiencing the situation through the self, which means that our experience of that particular situation takes place in, or at least through, that self. It's like I said, you have many different colored glasses lying on a table in front of you. You are exposed to a particular stimuli from the outside. You pick up one pair of colored glasses and put them on. Now everything looks green. And that's what we're doing with these selves. Your experience of greenness happens through that self. But take care of one thing. You may be seeing that everything has a green coloring, right? Let's say you're wearing yellow glasses and the sky now looks green. But you're still seeing the sky. So it's not that there's nothing there, but it just all seems green to you now. But when you make that shift and become aware, there must be something that's looking through the glasses. There must be a self that is beyond this particular self that makes everything look green. Then you can become aware that beyond all of these outer selves, there's a core of your being that isn't the outer selves, that isn't your outer personality. It's not your physical body, it's not your emotions, it's not your thoughts, it's not even your deeper sense of identity, the nationality, the sex, the family, the religion you were brought up in. There is a core of your being that isn't created in reaction to anything in the world. It exists of its own right. It is self-sufficient. It doesn't need anything from the world to define itself. And that's how you can free yourself not only from the biggest lie, but you can free yourself from all of these smaller lies of these subconscious selves. They're all based on a lie, namely that you have to react a certain way. And that's when you can start beginning to look at your life and say, why? Why do I have to react a certain way? Yes, of course. When I put on yellow glasses, the sky is going to look green. But do I have to put on the yellow glasses? Couldn't I put on the purple glasses? Or couldn't I choose not to put on any glasses? What if I systematically got rid of the glasses so that nothing in this world triggers a reaction? Which means what? It means I can now look at a particular situation and I can choose my reaction. As I said, most people live their entire lives without consciously choosing their reaction to situations. They are just exposed to a situation, it triggers one of these subconscious selves, and they react through the self. And that is how they can be controlled by other people. That is how even an entire population can be pacified by some kind of power elite that controls them. Just look at the Catholic Church during the Middle Ages. It had enormous power over people. Even if you are Catholic today, you can barely understand the power that the Catholic Church had over people's minds 1,000 years ago. Because people back then really seriously believed that they would go to hell for all eternity if they weren't good Catholics. And what did that mean? Well, if you look at society as it was back then, there was the Catholic Church that ruled people's minds because it told them what to believe and what to believe about life. But there was also the king and the noble class that ruled people's physical lives because the Catholic Church had an alliance with the kings. They were even talking about the divine right of kings, that the Catholic Church had authorized the kings and the noblemen to rule over the common people. And the result was that 98% of the population were slaves of the top 2% of the population. And that is, of course, not freedom. But this started in the mind because people were brought up to create all of these subconscious selves that made them believe, I'm a powerless, I'm born as a peasant, all I can be in my life is a peasant. And I have to live my entire life this way. I have no choices. I'm a sinner. All I can do is be a good Catholic and hope for salvation after this life, so I won't burn forever in hell. I know there are still people who believe this, but anyway, you didn't know, you wouldn't be watching this. So, you see what I'm saying? This is the reason this is the biggest lie in the world. Because this is what keeps people trapped. And what is the effect of it? The effect of all of these subconscious selves is that your mind becomes a prison for you, the real you. Because you think you can't go beyond it. You can't relate to the world in any other way than through all of these subconscious selves, even the ones that color the way you look at life in general. And the key to freedom, personal, psychological, spiritual freedom, is to become aware of this process or this dynamic and realize that there's a process whereby you can systematically free yourself from all of these selves. Now, I have talked about how to do this in several other videos, so I'm not going to go into it here other than say it requires you to take one self at a time. And the easiest way is to look at, why am I reacting a certain way to certain people or certain situations? Then you see the self, you examine, what's the belief behind it? Like, I'm a powerless being and I can't stand up to those who are bigger than me. But many other more complex beliefs. And then you see that it's an illusion, you see that, and you make a conscious choice to let go of the illusion. Then you can overcome that self and you are more free. And if you keep doing this systematically, and it is a process that takes time, I'm not promising you a quick fix, but if you keep doing it, you will become more and more free. And you can come to a point where you are completely free because you have no reactions. There's nothing that triggers you into reacting. And you can certainly come to a point where the reactions you have right now that make your life difficult, those have been overcome. It's not like, I'm not trying to tell you that, oh, it's a long process and only at the end will you feel at peace and free. No, you will feel at peace, or you will feel more free and more at peace as soon as you overcome one of these selves. Because right now, whatever your situation is, there is likely to be some situation you are facing on the outer that's triggering one or maybe a couple of these specific subconscious selves. And they're coloring your life experience, making your life difficult, miserable, whatever. And just imagine that you overcome that one or those couple of selves. How much better would you feel? How much freer would you feel? So what I'm saying is, for each time you overcome a self, there's an instant reward. You feel freer, you feel more at peace, you feel better. You're free to choose your reactions. And as I said with the supervisor at work, what if you come to a point where you have no reaction to that supervisor? Because, there's a very, very simple secret here to dealing with other people. If you're facing a person who's bullying you, why is a human being bullying other human beings or trying to control them, being mean to them? Why? Because they get something out of it. I learned when I was 5 years old, I realized there were older children that were trying to tease anybody. They were targeting everybody. And there were some children that got teased more than others. Why? Because those children reacted the way the bully wanted them to react. And the bully got a psychological kick out of it. So I learned very quickly, if you don't react to those who are trying to tease you, they don't get a kick out of it, and then they stop teasing you because it isn't fun anymore. And it's the same thing with the supervisor at work. That person wants a reaction from you. And so far, that person has gotten that reaction. If you don't react anymore, the person won't know what to do. And it doesn't really matter what the person does, because if you have no reaction, what's the big deal? So, I know it's been a long video already, but if we really try to step back, because this relates to the biggest secret or the biggest lie, the biggest secret that can replace the lie is that the only thing that really matters on this planet, in this world, is your life experience, your inner experience. That's the only thing that really matters to you. And you have the potential to deliberately and consciously change your inner experience by overcoming these selves that pull you into reacting. You may not be able to change certain outer conditions, but you can still change the way you experience those conditions so they don't trigger an unpleasant experience in you. And the reason why I say that this is the biggest lie is because, as I said, there is a power elite of people on Earth who want to control the population. If you want to know who these people are, why they're doing what they're doing, I have a video called How the World Was Created. Watch that video and you'll know what that power elite is. I have some other videos in the same playlist to talk more about it. But the bottom line here is that there is a power elite that has managed to put most people on this planet into this seeing themselves as reactionary beings. Or rather, they are reactionary beings that don't even see themselves that way. They're not even aware that they are reactionary beings. And this means they can be controlled. The power elite knows how to trigger people, and they're successful for most people. And the last thing they want anyone to realize is what they're doing and how they're doing it. So the biggest lie is precisely what prevents you from freeing yourself from external control. And you see why I started with this lie? Because only when you realize that you don't have to let outer circumstances trigger a certain inner experience can you avoid being controlled by other people. Because if there's a trigger in you, if there's a button they can push, then all they have to do is push the button, and now you're reacting, and they know exactly what you're going to do. You are controllable. And the last thing they want is for you to be free from their control, and therefore they don't want you to know the lie that I have been exposing in this video. And if you really get this, what I'm saying here, you can put yourself on this systematic path, I call it the spiritual path, where you free yourself from all of these triggers in your mind that makes you controllable. And then you can come to a point where you can say, okay, well, have I changed anything outside myself? Have I changed that there's a power elite on Earth that's controlling the majority of the population? Well, no. But does it matter? If nobody can control your life experience, does it matter? And in the long run, if enough people follow this path and free themselves from this control, the control will start to fade away, as it already has started to fade away. And I know there are many people who will say, oh, well, the world is getting worse. Look at all these conspiracy theories of control and here and there. But just ask yourself a simple question. Do you think that the power elite who had people in an iron grip during the Middle Ages, the kings, the noblemen, the clergy, do you think they wanted democracy? No. So how did democracy come into being? Because there were people like you who started freeing themselves in their own minds from this mechanism of control. And that has pulled up on the entire collective consciousness and society in general. I talk about this in several other videos. And that's why we have democracy. And the very fact that we have this means the power elite can control everything. And they are losing control precisely because there are more and more of us who, instead of trying to change outer conditions, start by changing our inner conditions. And as I said, when you do overcome all of these reactionary patterns, or at least some of them, you will have a more clear vision of what you can do in specific situations. And now you can take creative action instead of reaction. So as long as you have the selves, everything you do is a reaction. But when you free yourselves from the selves, you can start taking a creative action, and you will see what that action will be when you're no longer seeing through that coloring of the self. So it's the key, the lie I'm exposing here is the key to your personal freedom, but it's also in the long term the key to planetary freedom. So I hope this has been some inspiration for you. I will do other videos about other lies and Some of them will be quite different, but I wanted to start with this because, as I said, once you get this one lie, you have a process for freeing yourself from all of the other lies.